Hey guys, Dr. Philip here from Northside Pediatrics. Exciting times are here. The dogs and the Braves are doing big things. Our kids are back at school. And just last week, you guys probably heard that we're a step closer to being able to have a safe and effective COVID-19 vaccine for our kids ages 5 to 11. So the FDA Advisory Committee held a meeting last week on October 26th to review all the data on safety and efficacy of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine for this younger age group. So I wanted to spend some time today to just review this information with you guys and hopefully just help inform you about everything you need to know regarding COVID and COVID vaccination in the youngest of our school-aged kids. I thought it might be easiest to do this in kind of a question and answer format. So here we go. So how is COVID-19 affecting 5 to 11-year-olds through the pandemic? The 5 to 11-year-old age group has accounted for around 9% of all COVID-19 cases in the United States and approximately 40% of all pediatric cases to date. This age group has also included a little over 8,300 hospitalizations and 143 deaths to date. This data that I just presented was taken from the CDC's epidemiologic information presented to the FDA Advisory Committee last week at their meeting. While less frequent than in adults, kids in this age group are still affected by the complications that COVID-19 infection has been known to cause in older kids and adults. Things like long COVID symptoms, myocarditis, MIS-C, hospitalizations, and death. It's important to also realize that when you consider MIS-C cases specifically, it's the 5 to 11-year-old age range that accounts for most of these cases of MIS-C. Kids are also, unfortunately, an important part of secondary transmission. So sick kids have the ability to spread COVID to other classmates, but also bring it home and spread it to vulnerable family members. Like any unprotected individual, kids also can serve as a new fertile ground for COVID to infect and potentially mutate within and create new variants down the road. Variants are slightly mutated forms of the virus that have the risk of becoming more infectious or more deadly. Variants are something we can prevent from developing in the future by finding ways to decrease ability of this virus to keep spreading amongst us and infecting us. Vaccinations are a great way always at this goal. For all these reasons that I discussed, the 5 to 11-year-old age range is just as important to protect with a safe and effective vaccine like older kids and adults. How well will the COVID vaccine work for kids 5 to 11? And were there any safety issues in these studies on kids ages 5 to 11? So in Pfizer's clinical trials in this age group, vaccine efficacy was found to be 90.7%. This is the chance that you won't have any symptoms if COVID-19 invades your body. It was also found that in this age group, the vaccine was 100% effective at preventing hospitalizations and death from COVID-19. The trial involved just over 3,000 kids, and monitoring was done for 2 to 3 months after vaccines were given, and they found no evidence of any serious side effects, including myocarditis, which I'll come back to later and discuss a little bit further on. The most common immediate side effects were like those that older kids might experience or adults might experience after vaccinations. They included things like redness and swelling at the injection site, fatigue, and headaches. These side effects were seen much less frequently, however, in these younger kids compared to older kids and adults, probably due to the fact that only a lower vaccine dosage was needed for the 5 to 11-year age range, which I'll talk also further about down the road here in this video. All these symptoms experienced were short-lived and resolved fully. Remember too that these kind of short-term symptoms immediately after vaccination are the types of symptoms that we would expect to come along after any vaccination, and they are all a sign that our immune system is working on generating good protection from the vaccine. My child is about to turn 12. Which COVID-19 vaccine should they get? I would recommend, and we all would as pediatricians, to go ahead and get the vaccine and the dose that is recommended for your child's current age. So, unlike antibiotics in pediatrics, vaccination doses are not based off of weight. The reason? Antibiotics help your body get rid of germs when you're sick. And so the right amount of medicine is needed to make it to all parts of the body where these germs might be. Different doses will be needed based off the size of your child to accomplish this goal. Vaccines, on the other hand, simply are just teaching your immune system how to stop germs before they make you sick. You can think of vaccines in that way, kind of like receiving an email with instructions, or like a trainer coming to teach you something new at your job. Only a very small dose on the scale of micrograms is needed to teach your immune system. Cells in your immune system go to the spot where the vaccine is given rather than the vaccine needing to get all around the body like an antibiotic. With the information your immune system learns about a germ from the vaccine, your body will now be prepared to launch an attack and get rid of this germ should it ever try to invade your body in the future. Currently, only Pfizer BioNTech's mRNA vaccinations are recommended for kids less than 18. Those that are 12 to 17 already have a Pfizer vaccine available, and it's a 2-dose regimen that are each 30 micrograms, separated by 21 days. For the 5 to 11-year-old age range, they would receive 2 doses of 10 microgram vaccine, separated also by 21 days. Unfortunately for now, those under 5 will not have a COVID-19 vaccine available, but there are studies that have been well underway for months in this age group, all the way down to 6 months of age. So there's more to come. I'm familiar with mRNA vaccinations now, but can you remind me of how they work and what we know about their safety? mRNA vaccines work by just providing our body with instructions to produce one very specific part of a virus, in this case, the spike protein, to create an immune response and generate antibodies against the virus. Once mRNA enters the body, it falls apart really quickly. In fact, mRNA is so unstable that it requires an envelope, a lipid nanoparticle that you guys have probably heard about used in this vaccine to help keep it stable enough to reach our immune cells. Once the mRNA molecule enters our cells, it delivers the instructions that it's meant to, and it breaks down very quickly. It does not enter the nucleus of the cell, nor does it enter our genes. So anything that you've heard about such things is completely misinformation. What about side effects? So in the short term, after getting a vaccine, the most common side effects are similar to other types of vaccines: a sore arm, redness at the injection site, fatigue, fever, chills, headache, muscle aches, body aches in general. These are side effects that are temporary and mostly mild or moderate. Side effects may be worse after the second dose in some individuals. Extremely rare have been reports of either anaphylaxis, which is a severe allergic reaction, or myocarditis and pericarditis, inflammation of the heart muscle and the sac that wraps the heart, respectively. Reassuringly, as I mentioned earlier, there were no cases of myocarditis that occurred in the studies for the 5 to 11-year age group. So you might be thinking, well, what about long-term side effects from these vaccines? While it is impossible to know the very long-term safety of specifically the COVID mRNA vaccines, I hope that 2 key points will keep you more reassured, like I am, that these vaccines should continue to prove safe in the long term. First, mRNA vaccination technology as a whole has been around for decades and has been studied well before the pandemic and has been shown safe as a type of vaccine over that time through various clinical trials that have been ongoing in human beings. Secondly, there have been no vaccines to date that have ever been licensed that were found to have unexpected long-term safety problems years or decades after they were introduced. The rarest of adverse effects that have ever occurred with vaccinations have been discovered at the latest within a few months after being administered. I think it's important to also note that with all these COVID-19 vaccines that have come out, that have been approved and or granted emergency use authorizations by the FDA will continue to monitor everything with these vaccines through both systems that the FDA and the CDC have to monitor vaccine safety. And all COVID-19 vaccinations will have extended phase 3 trials to continue to follow safety for up to 2 years, which is much longer follow-up than most vaccines during development phase. This will help us make sure that these vaccinations continue to prove safe as the years go on. What about these cases of myocarditis I have heard about in some kids after they received COVID vaccination? How worried do I need to be? Myocarditis, or inflammation of the heart muscle following COVID mRNA vaccinations, have fortunately been extremely rare, and they pale in comparison to cases of myocarditis that we have known can develop after being sick with COVID infection. To break it down into numbers, the risk of myocarditis following vaccination is approximately 1 in 40,000 in the most common age group in which it has been reported, which are those that are between the ages of 16 to 29, and specifically more so common in males than females. The rates of myocarditis caused by infection, on the other hand, are approximately 1 in 50 to 100 cases of COVID infection. Additionally, these cases of myocarditis following COVID mRNA vaccines have been very mild and have fully resolved without any additional complications or deaths caused. Cases are typically found to resolve within a few days at most, and they resolve just with rest and anti-inflammatories like Motrin or Aleve. You have to contrast this with the type of myocarditis that occurs more frequently with infection. This type of myocarditis leads to prolonged hospitalizations that are typically at least 5 days in the hospital and typically in the ICU, and they can include long-term heart complications and sometimes death. As I alluded to before, post-vaccine myocarditis seems to occur most often following the second dose, mostly in males ages 16 to 29, and most cases occur within around 7 days to a max of 2 weeks from vaccination. Dr. Matt Oster, who many of you guys may know from Sibley Cardiology tied with Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, was one of the speakers on the advisory committee to the FDA this past week. And he talked about how myocarditis of any variety occurring in kids has always been seemingly involving male teens more than any other demographic. And the thought there is that it may somehow relate to higher amounts of testosterone in the body. In any case, as I mentioned earlier, specifically in the 5 to 11 year age range, there were no cases of post-vaccination myocarditis seen in up to 3 months of monitoring after vaccinations and studies. As pediatricians, we feel really confident that the known risks of COVID-19 infection far outweigh any risk of rare adverse reactions that have been seen with COVID vaccination, including myocarditis. What about concerns of infertility after receiving COVID-19 vaccinations? Unfounded claims linking COVID-19 vaccines to infertility have made their rounds on the internet and through the community, and they have scientifically been disproven. There's no evidence to suggest that any COVID-19 vaccine can lead to loss of fertility. While fertility is not specifically studied in the clinical trials of the vaccine, no loss of fertility has been reported amongst trial participants or among the millions who have received the vaccines since their authorization. And no signs of infertility appeared in any animal studies done prior to even human studies. In contrast, COVID infection has been associated with higher risks of stillbirth and miscarriage. Similarly to the infertility concern, there is no evidence to suggest that COVID-19 vaccines affect puberty in any way. My child already had COVID. Do they still need the vaccine? The answer to this is yes. Unfortunately, the amount of immunity people create after infection with COVID varies significantly. This could relate to various factors, including how severely you were infected or became sick with COVID, and other unknown factors that vary from person to person. With COVID vaccinations, on the other hand, you create a more expected, consistent antibody protection across the board in kids that can better give you the peace of mind that your child will be considerably less likely to become severely sick, hospitalized, or pass away from a future infection with COVID. Even if it was possible to know that your child already created great protection from their infection, being vaccinated as well would do nothing more than just further bolster their protective antibodies. We kind of consider them almost like unicorns or superheroes of immunity against COVID. An additional benefit of vaccinations has been the ability to protect our kids against variants and also the ability to help prevent COVID from mutating into new variants, like the most recent and highly infectious Delta variant we've been dealing with. When you are vaccinated, you've basically given your body the ability to fight COVID the best that it can, should it ever try to infect your body in the future. Without new fertile ground for COVID to infect, the virus has no place to replicate and mutate, which means less risk of creating a variant in the future. Can my child receive the COVID vaccine and the flu vaccine together? The answer is yes. In fact, not only the flu vaccine, but any other vaccine your child needs or is behind on, you can definitely get with the COVID vaccine. This segues into an important other topic that I wanted to discuss as well, and that is the importance of please making sure that you keep your kids caught up with all their vaccines that they need. By keeping our kids on schedule with vaccinations, we can avoid allowing other germs an opportunity to return and wreak havoc on our kids. So, related as well, just wanted to remind you guys that our office is open fully for checkups of kids of all ages. So, if your kids are due for a checkup, please feel free to call our office and schedule an appointment. We'll also, at that time at your checkup, make sure that your kids are caught up to speed on all the vaccines that they need and do any catching up that's needed. We're also ready to meet any new friends or families that you guys may know that are looking for a new pediatric home. So please keep those great referrals coming to Northside Pediatrics. Well, guys, thanks so much for taking the time to listen to me today. We really consider at Northside Pediatrics a huge and important part of our job being educating you guys whenever we can, wherever we can, including platforms like this video. With the latest information on kids and their health that's backed by science. And so I really hope that this information was helpful for you guys as you consider COVID-19 vaccinations for kids in that 5 to 11-year age range. I also wanted to take this time to just remind you of how grateful we are for each and every one of you guys and for all that love and support you guys have been showing us and showering us with throughout the entire pandemic. I really don't know how we would have gotten here as providers and as a practice without your guys' love and support. So thank you for all of that. We really do cherish the opportunity and consider it an absolute privilege to help take care of your kids at Northside Pediatrics. So thank you guys for everything, and I really look forward to seeing you guys around at some point at Northside Pediatrics. Thanks again.